Conservatives, and I have MP Mclean for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I start my questions, let me echo my colleagues around the committee here in condemning what's happening in Ukraine today by the Russian aggressors. This is a time when democracies around the world are sliding, and we need to make sure we stand fast with our democratic friends in the Ukraine and ensure that we stop this as much as we can. So moving to questions now, Mr. McKillop, Ms. Achimov, thank you very much for the work you do and for being here at our committee today to give us more information. I am going to get a little granular on here with you because you did speak, Mr. McKillop, about over the week that the Emergencies Act was in force, that a number of crowdsourcing organizations reached out to register with FINTRAC. My understanding of all crowdsourcing sites is that they are regulated at the provincial securities level, and that the decision was made not to have them report to FINTRAC because it really was a duplication of the reports that would go to FINTRAC, because the money flowing into them is already regulated by at least one financial provider on the in and the out. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. I wasn't sure if Donna was going to jump in there on the regulatory side. They are, I believe you're correct, there is some regulation to crowdfunding. I'm not sure, and I'm not an expert on who regulates the crowdfunding platforms. However, Mr. Chair, it is correct that there is always a touch point with a financial institution that is regulated by FINTRAC and that does provide reports to FINTRAC on money either being going through their own bank account or money being dispersed from their bank account to the person or the entity that set up a page, for example, a GoFundMe page. GoFundMe would have dispersed the money. It would have been through a bank or a financial institution.
Well, thank you. So in the week that you were actually getting some requests from these crowdsourcing sites to actually get set up through a FINTRAC reporting mechanism, they were just going through the reporting mechanism saying something's emerging here where we're going to have to not only abide by the current regulations that are already enforced upon them by the provincial securities regulators, but now we're going to have this extra regime, like we say, belt and suspenders, in order to kind of get through the FINTRAC mechanisms. Would that be, an overlap again, like we call a duplication of efforts?
Maybe I'll jump in here, Mr. Chair. I don't know if it would necessarily be a duplication of efforts. Certainly, the security sector and the Ontario Securities Commission, we work very closely with. Our mandates slightly differ because we are responsible on the anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing piece of it. So in our early days, as I mentioned, we fielded numerous queries from both crowd funding platforms as well as payment service providers, trying to understand if they are actually required and if they what their requirements are. We tried to make it easy to self-assess, as well as provide guidance from that perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm going to go back to some remarks Mr. McKillop made on here about how the intent of what the government wanted to do in the Emergencies Act by shutting off funding to these organizations that were undertaking illegal activity at the time in Canada, how that had its intended effect by cutting off funds to those organizations. The intended effect, of course, was already being done prior to the Emergencies Act through the GoFundMe cancellation. So was the Emergencies Act required in that respect in order to kind of stop the GoFundMe type of disbursements?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Chair. I don't think it's for me to determine or to say or to opine on the need for any legislation. However, GoFundMe did on their own stop the page and decide to reimburse the donors and to not allow it to the fund to continue through their platform. However, my understanding was that they then moved to a different platform, Give, Send, Go, which was less perhaps cooperative in terms of saying whether or not they were going to stop the funds happening on their page. And Mr. Chair, there are a number, I would say thousands of crowdfunding platforms around the world that are accessible. And so I think that in terms of the Emergencies Act and ensuring that any money that was raised through a crowdfunding platform that went through a financial institution to be dispersed to support the illegal blockades were in fact
Okay.
appropriately
I
stopped.
just ask one final question
Thank you,
here.
MP Mclean. We've gone well over 5 minutes, but